My name is Claire Whitman. I am 34 years old and live in Charleston. 3 days before my sister's wedding, my fiancé Ethan and I discovered our names erased from her public registry, deleted in front of 180 guests, as if we had never existed. Not even after I wired $25,000 for her venue. Not after every debt I covered. Not after every time I chose her over myself. Then came the email from my mother. Only 7 words. It's Sophie's day. Don't make it harder. I didn't reply. I didn't beg. Instead, while they lit chandeliers and posed for photographs, Ethan and I drove to Sea Island, Georgia, where the ocean was ours, and silence felt like freedom. But soon the wedding videos began to spread online. The grooms stormed out. Sophie was sobbing on stage. And millions of strangers were asking the same question. What had she done? And what would I say? That moment didn't come out of nowhere. It began quietly. A week earlier, when Ethan and I were still trying to choose the perfect gift, unaware that the screen in front of us was about to confirm what my heart had always feared, I was sitting on the couch with my laptop open, a mug of coffee cooling on the table beside me, when Ethan leaned over my shoulder and said he had found something on Sophie's wedding registry that looked perfect. He had that calm but excited look he always carried when he thought he had solved something. We had been scrolling for half an hour, debating between a sleek espresso machine and a designer set of wine glasses, trying to decide what to give my younger sister and her fiancé. I was tired but still willing, because giving a thoughtful gift felt like the right thing to do, even if Sophie had barely said thank you. When I paid the deposit for her venue last year, I typed our names into the RSVP tab to double-check the shipping address. The page refreshed, and the words stared back at me like a punch in the chest. Guest list finalized. Name not found. I tried again. Slower this time. Convinced I had misspelled Whitman, the screen blinked and repeated the same message. Not found. I clicked the drop-down menu. Scrolled past line after line of names. Friends from college, distant cousins, business partners of my father, even her old roommate who once told her I was too intense. 180 names. Neatly arranged. None of them were mine. None of them were Ethan's. I felt my stomach twist. Not with shock, but with the kind of dull confirmation that comes after you have always suspected something. Ethan frowned. Leaning closer, "Try my name," he said. I did. Same message. Not found. He sat back, jaw tightening. This has to be a mistake. No one just deletes family off a registry. My hand hovered over the mouse. Maybe it was a technical glitch. Maybe Sophie forgot to add us back after some update. My heart wanted an explanation, but the sinking weight in my chest knew better. I clicked refresh again, desperate for a different outcome. The names didn't change. It was final. A part of me wanted to laugh at the absurdity, at the cruelty of being erased in such a public and casual way. If anyone else searched, they would see we weren't on the list. As if we never existed. Ethan shook his head slowly. I'm going to call her. I put my hand on his arm. Don't. I already knew what would happen. Sophie would brush it off. Tell me it wasn't personal. That I was overreacting. That it was her day. The same script she had rehearsed her whole life. Only now she had the power of deletion to back it up. I closed the laptop, but the weight didn't lift. The silence between us felt heavier than words. Then my phone buzzed on the table. A new email. My eyes flicked to the sender and froze. Valerie Whitman. My mother. I clicked it open, hoping for clarity. Maybe even apology. Instead, 7 words sat cold on the screen. It's Sophie's day. Don't make it harder. No greeting. No explanation. Not even a signature. My throat burned. She hadn't even tried to pretend this was a misunderstanding. She had sided with Sophie in the simplest, bluntest way possible. By cutting me out with a single line, Ethan read over my shoulder. His face darkened. That's it. That's all she has to say to you. He looked at me like he expected me to crumble. But he didn't. I just sat there, staring at the words until they blurred. I wasn't sure if I wanted to cry or throw the laptop across the room. Instead, I pressed the lid shut and pushed it away. I stood up and walked to the window, pulling the curtain aside. Outside, Charleston glowed with late afternoon light. The streets lined with magnolia trees, couples strolling by with paper coffee cups in hand. The city alive in its soft, ordinary way. Inside, my world had shifted with a single confirmation. I was not invited. We were not invited. Ethan stood behind me. His reflection in the glass. He touched my shoulder gently. This is insane. You paid for that venue deposit. Claire. You were there every time Sophie needed something. And now she deletes you, like you are some distant acquaintance. I didn't answer. My mind spun back through years of moments where I swallowed anger, where I let Sophie's needs come first, where I made myself smaller so she could shine brighter. It had always been like this. But never this blatant. Never this public. It was one thing to be overlooked, another to be erased. I turned from the window, meeting Ethan's steady eyes. There was no outrage in mine, only a calm sharpness that scared me more than tears ever could. I whispered, "She didn't just cut me. She cut us." He nodded. Yefset. Anger simmering beneath his calm exterior. So what do we do? For a long moment I didn't answer. My heart was pounding. But my hands felt strangely steady. I sank back onto the couch, picked up the cold mug of coffee, and took a sip. The bitterness grounded me. I set it down carefully. "We don't beg," I said quietly. "Not this time." The hum of the air conditioner filled the silence. Ethan sat beside me, still watching, still waiting. I leaned back and let the stillness settle over me like a heavy blanket, one that carried both hurt and clarity. Somewhere inside, I knew this was not the end of the story. It was only the first cut, the first undeniable proof that I was never meant to be part of their perfect picture. And for the first time, I felt the cold edge of something different rising in me. Not rage, not grief, something sharper. The quiet certainty that I would not play their part anymore. I thought back to all the years that had shaped me into the person who never asked for more. The one who was always expected to step aside. My father Richard had perfected the art of comparison. Sophie's laugh was brighter. Sophie's style was effortless. Sophie would make him proud someday. I heard it so often that it became background noise, like the drone of a lawnmower on a Sunday afternoon. My mother Valerie played her own role in it. She did not raise her voice, but she had a way of asking me to give in with the kind of tone that left no room for refusal. "Claire, let your sister have this. Claire, she needs it more than you do. Claire, don't make things harder." The words never sounded cruel, but they carved away at me year after year until I learned to bend without even noticing I was bending. In 2011, I received a letter that should have changed my life. A full scholarship to Duke's MBA program. I remember sitting in the kitchen with the envelope open in my hands, my pulse hammering in my throat, thinking this was my chance to finally carve something out for myself. But that was the same year Sophie claimed she was too overwhelmed to be alone in New York. And my mother sat across from me with tears in her eyes, saying she worried about leaving her youngest without support. She asked me if it was really the right time to leave. I folded the acceptance letter back into its envelope and tucked it into a drawer. I told myself I was doing the right thing, staying in Charleston, being the good daughter. I never did make it to Durham. Sophie did not even remember that conversation. Years later, it was the same pattern. Only the numbers grew bigger. Sophie maxed out her credit cards on furniture for an apartment she barely lived in. She called me crying, saying her credit score was ruined, that she would never recover. I wrote a check and told her it would be fine. She promised to pay me back, but the subject never came up again. It became another secret ledger I kept tucked away, not in a bank but in the hollow of my chest. Then came the wedding deposit. $25,000. She said her card was maxed, that she had no one else to turn to. I transferred the money without hesitation, telling myself it was temporary, that I was helping her start her life. I watched her post photos of her engagement party at the very venue I had paid for, never once mentioning me, never once acknowledging the weight of that check. I was invisible even in the moments I carried her. Ethan listened to these stories before. In pieces. Late at night, when the exhaustion of my family pressed too heavily on me to keep it in. He never said "I told you so." He just squeezed my hand. His silence steady. Now he looked at me and said softly, "You see it now, don't you?" I swallowed hard, staring at the muted blue light spilling across our living room. For so long I convinced myself this was what family was. Sacrifice without recognition. Love measured in usefulness. My father believed Sophie's shine would always be brighter. My mother believed harmony was more important than fairness. And Sophie believed she was entitled to every sacrifice I made. And I, foolishly, believed that if I gave enough, one day they would see me. I remembered being 10 years old, standing on the porch in the sticky summer air, holding Sophie's hand after she broke her arm, falling off her bike. I was the one who calmed her down while my mother rushed to find the car keys. I was the one who whispered that it would be okay, that she was safe. My father carried her inside and did not even notice. I was still standing there in tears, my hands shaking. That image of being on the edge, unseen, never quite left me. Now, sitting in my own living room with Ethan by my side, I felt all those moments stack up like bricks, each one a reminder that I had been building a house that was never mine to live in. I rubbed my temples, the ache behind my eyes spreading. I was tired of the silent ledgers, tired of carrying debt no one admitted was there. I had been the one who made peace, who paid bills, who held hands, who sacrificed. And what had it bought me? A deleted name on a guest list. An email that told me not to make it harder. Ethan placed his arm along the back of the couch. Waiting. I whispered more to myself than to him. I was never a sister to them. I was an account. An ATM they could withdraw from whenever they needed. My voice cracked on the last word, but it felt more like truth than defeat. Ethan leaned forward, pressing his forehead to mine. "Not anymore," he said. "Not unless you let them." His words hung in the air, heavier than the silence that followed. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in years, I let myself believe that maybe he was right. The evening stretched on, the hum of the city outside muffled through our walls, the world moving in its ordinary rhythm while mine had shifted permanently. I sat there with Ethan's arm around me and realized that the picture I had carried of family was nothing but a faded frame. The center was hollow, and no matter how much I poured into it, it would never be filled. The awareness was sharp, almost cruel, but it was also freeing. I could finally see the truth without trying to decorate it into something prettier. And in that stillness, in that quiet acknowledgement, I felt the first fragile strand of resolve take root. Ethan shifted slightly so he could see my face, his eyes searching mine, as if waiting for me to say what he already knew. His voice was steady, but gentle when he finally spoke. "Do you want to stay here and let them humiliate you again? Or do you want to walk away?" The question hung in the air. Simple but enormous. For a second I just stared at him, the words sinking into the cracks that had opened in me all evening. Staying meant more silence, more scrolling through Instagram while Sophie smiled in a dress I helped pay for, more pretending that I was fine with being erased. Walking away meant something I had never dared before, choosing myself. I leaned back, exhaling slowly. My chest tightened, but not from fear, from clarity. I whispered, "I can't stay here and wait for their show to play out. Not this time." Ethan nodded once. No triumph in his expression, only quiet agreement. "Then let's leave," he said. "Not just the house. Let's go somewhere they can't reach us." He pulled out his phone, opened the airline app, and set it on the coffee table in front of me like an open door. "Where would you want to be if none of this existed?" he asked. The answer came before I could stop it. Sea Island. I had read about the resort in a travel magazine years ago. A secluded stretch of Georgia coastline, where the wealthy escaped to golf courses and quiet beaches. It was close enough to drive in a day, but felt a world away from Charleston. I wanted the kind of silence you couldn't buy with flowers or forced apologies. I wanted the sound of waves instead of Sophie's voice. Ethan smiled faintly. Already typing. Then Sea Island. It is. I watched his fingers move across the screen. Pulling up flights and hotel reservations, my heart pounded with something I didn't expect. Relief. Like stepping into cold water after hours in suffocating heat. I picked up my own phone, swiped to my calendar, and found the bright block of text that said Sophie's wedding. With one flick, I deleted it. No hesitation. Then I opened the family group chat, the same thread that had been filled with venue photos and dress fittings, where my comments were ignored and Sophie's were praised. My thumb hovered for only a moment before I hit leave conversation. The bubble vanished. And with it the last tether that kept me bound to their show. Ethan glanced up at me as if checking to see if I regretted it. He didn't. Not even a little. I felt lighter. Like someone had opened a window in a suffocating room. He reached for my hand and gave it a squeeze. Proud of you, he said quietly. I didn't answer. I just squeezed back. The night stretched past midnight as we made plans. We chose a hotel overlooking the ocean, booked 2 tickets for a morning flight to Savannah, and arranged for a rental car to take us the rest of the way. Ethan handled the details while I sat curled on the couch, watching him, realizing how different it felt to plan something for myself rather than for someone else. For once, I wasn't coordinating a family holiday, not arranging a dinner Sophie would later take credit for. This was mine. When the confirmation emails came through, Ethan slid his phone toward me so I could read. I smiled. The first real smile I had felt in days. We're really doing this, I murmured. He leaned back, folding his arms, his expression softening. You deserve to breathe, Claire. Even if it's just for a week. You deserve it. I got up and walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and leaned against the counter. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the fridge and the faint sound of traffic beyond the window. My chest rose and fell slowly. I thought about all the years I had stayed in Charleston, waiting for scraps of recognition, waiting for the role of good daughter to finally earn me a seat at the table. Now I was walking away, not with a scream, not with a fight, but with the quiet decision to stop playing. I carried the glass back to the couch and sat beside Ethan again. The clock on the wall ticked toward 1 in the morning. We would have to pack in just a few hours. But I wasn't tired. I opened my laptop, clicked through my files, and found the scanned receipt for the $25,000 deposit I had wired to Sophie's wedding venue. I stared at it for a long moment, then dragged the file into a new folder. I named simply Records. I closed the laptop with a calm finality. Let them pay their own bills from now on. Ethan stretched, yawning, then pulled me close until my head rested on his shoulder. Tomorrow, he said. Tomorrow we're gone. I nodded against him. Tomorrow we would not be sitting in Charleston pretending. Tomorrow we would be in a car headed south. Toward the ocean. Toward silence. For the first time in years, I would not be waiting for my family's approval. I would be living outside of their reach. The apartment was dark except for the glow of a single lamp. I felt the weight of exhaustion finally begin to pull at me. But it was not the heavy exhaustion of defeat. It was the kind that comes after making a choice you had avoided for too long. As I closed my eyes, I pictured the shoreline of Sea Island, the tide stretching wide, erasing footprints, as if to remind me that leaving is sometimes the cleanest answer. I let that image stay with me as I drifted into sleep. The decision already made. The first step already taken. The morning sun poured through the blinds before I was ready to wake. But my mind was already alert, racing ahead to the day. We packed quickly, tossing swimsuits and sundresses into bags, Ethan sliding his laptop into its case and double-checking the flight confirmation. By noon we were at the airport, moving through security with the steady rhythm of people who had decided not to look back. I watched the Charleston skyline shrink from the plane window, the familiar bridges and rooftops dissolving into clouds. I thought of my parents somewhere in their house across town, Sophie in her final fittings. The hum of preparation buzzing on without me. For the first time, I didn't feel the urge to be part of it. I felt only relief. We landed in Savannah, picked up the rental car, and drove toward the coast. The farther we went, the quieter the world became. The roads narrowed, lined with moss-draped oaks that arched overhead like watchful guardians. When we finally pulled into the resort at Sea Island, I felt like I had stepped into a different life. The lobby smelled of jasmine and salt air, the marble floors gleaming, the staff greeting us with genuine warmth. A concierge handed me a glass of chilled citrus water and welcomed us by name, as if I belonged here without question. Our room overlooked the ocean, floor-to-ceiling windows opening onto a balcony where the horizon stretched endlessly. I dropped my bag on the bed and walked straight out to the railing, the salty wind tugging at my hair, the sound of waves breaking steady and sure. Ethan came up behind me, slipping his arms around my waist. "Worth it already?" he murmured. I nodded, unable to find words big enough for the release I felt. That evening, we walked down to the beachside restaurant. Lanterns swayed gently in the breeze, their light scattering across white tablecloths. We sat at a corner table overlooking the sand, the sky blushing pink as the sun dipped lower. Ethan ordered grilled snapper, and I chose shrimp with citrus glaze. For the first time in weeks, I let myself enjoy the simple act of eating without the weight of what waited back home. We clinked glasses of chilled wine, and he asked me where I saw us in 5 years if family drama did not dictate everything. The question made me laugh softly, because I had never let myself imagine it. I thought for a moment, watching the waves. I said I wanted mornings without tension, a house filled with music instead of silence, work that grew because of my choices, not because I was proving myself to people who refused to see me. Ethan smiled and reached across the table for my hand. "That's exactly where we're headed," he said. But even in that glow of contentment, a shadow crept in. My mind drifted back to the $25,000 I wired to Sophie's venue. The balance I carried silently while she posted pictures of chandeliers and flower arches. I thought of the emails she sent me full of demands, followed by radio silence when she got what she wanted. Sitting there in the soft golden light, I wondered how I had let it go so far. How I had convinced myself that love was measured by the bills I paid. The food in front of me was rich with flavor, but there was a sourness I could not swallow. The bitterness of knowing I had been erased by the very people I funded. Later, back in the room, I slipped into a sundress and walked out to the balcony again. Ethan handed me a glass. Something bright and cold, garnished with lime. I held it up against the fading horizon, snapped a picture with my phone, and typed a caption without thinking. Glad I wasn't invited. Turns out I had front row seats anyway. I posted it and set the phone face down on the table. The sound of waves filled the silence between us. The truth carried out into the digital world without me needing to explain further. For a long while we just sat there, listening to the sea. Ethan leaned back in his chair, eyes half closed, a small smile playing at his lips. I let the breeze lift strands of my hair, the salt air cool on my skin. It felt like freedom, even if temporary, even if fragile. My chest loosened in a way I had not known was possible. The buzz of my phone broke the calm. I ignored it at first, not ready to let the outside world seep in. But it buzzed again, then again. Finally, I turned it over. A text from my cousin Lauren appeared on the screen. She rarely reached out, and when she did, it was usually with a casual photo or a holiday greeting. This time it was 5 words. "Did you hear about it?" My thumb hovered over the reply button, but I set the phone back down without answering. Whatever she meant could wait. The ocean was still here, the night still soft, and I wasn't ready to let anyone pull me back into their orbit. I wanted to stay in this bubble of peace for as long as it lasted. Ethan glanced at the phone, then at me. "Do you want to check it?" I shook my head. "Not tonight." He nodded, respecting the boundary without pressing further. We let the silence stretch again. This time not heavy, but comforting. I sipped the last of my drink and rested my elbows on the balcony railing. Somewhere beyond the horizon, my family was spinning their perfect picture, still believing I was the missing problem, not the missing piece. Here, I finally felt the strength of absence. The night air wrapped around me, carrying the promise of quiet that I had been denied for too long. The next morning, the sunlight was already spilling across the sheets when I opened my eyes. Ethan was sitting on the edge of the bed, his phone in hand, a crease between his brows. I propped myself up on one elbow, blinking against the brightness. "What is it?" I asked. "He hesitated," then held out the phone like it carried something fragile. "You should probably see this." I took it, expecting another text from Lauren, or maybe some passive comment from my mother. Instead, a TikTok video filled the screen. The first frame was shaky, filmed from somewhere in the middle of a crowd. Music played faintly in the background, strings and soft piano. Then the camera shifted, and I saw Sophie, my younger sister, in the satin gown I had glimpsed in fitting photos, standing at the altar with her veil slightly askew. She was clutching a bouquet, so tightly her knuckles were white. In the next second, the camera panned to a man in a tuxedo, Mark Dalton. He was striding away, his expression hard, jaw clenched, two groomsmen chasing after him, failing to slow him down. The guests' voices rose in confusion, some gasping, some whispering. Sophie spun toward him, her voice cracking through the speakers. "This isn't my fault. Someone talk to him." She lunged forward, but he kept walking, pushing past the rows of chairs, disappearing from the frame. The video ended abruptly, cutting off with Sophie's face twisted between disbelief and desperation. I stared at the screen, my pulse steady but my breath catching in my chest. "Play it again," Ethan said quietly. I did, this time watching every detail. The flowers arranged in perfect symmetry, the guests craning their necks, the way Sophie's shoulders slumped as the man she was supposed to marry walked away in front of everyone. When the clip ended again, I handed the phone back. "How many views?" I asked. Ethan swiped down. "Over 300,000 already. It was posted 2 hours ago." My lips pressed together. Not in a smile, not in shock, but in a strange calm. Karma had its own timing. Ethan leaned back against the headboard, shaking his head slowly. I have to admit, I did not see this coming. I pulled my knees to my chest, resting my chin on them. I did. Not this exact scene, but something. Sophie had always lived on borrowed balance, always shifting blame until there was no one left to catch it. Eventually someone was going to walk away. It just happened to be the man in the tuxedo. Another notification pinged on his phone. He opened it and let out a low whistle. More clips. Different angles. "People are stitching it already." He scrolled, showing me another video. This one from closer to the front. Sophie's makeup was streaking down her face as she cried out, insisting he was overreacting, begging someone to fix it. Guests exchanged uncomfortable looks, some standing to leave, others still frozen in their chairs. I set the phone on the nightstand, my hands folded in my lap. I wasn't gloating. There was no thrill in watching my sister unravel. What I felt was stillness, like the air after a thunderclap, heavy but clean. For years, I had been the one patching holes, covering cracks, spinning excuses to keep our family's image intact. Now, I wasn't there, and the cracks were splitting wide open, all on their own. Ethan studied me carefully. "You're awfully calm about this." I met his eyes, because it has nothing to do with me anymore. For once, I don't have to fix it. I let out a breath, the weight in my chest loosening as the words settled into the air. We dressed slowly, heading down to the resort cafe for breakfast. The dining room overlooked the ocean, the tide rolling in smooth and steady, oblivious to the chaos unraveling back in Charleston. As I sipped coffee and tasted the sweet tang of fresh citrus, my phone buzzed again and again. I ignored it, tucking it into my bag. I wanted to hear only the waves, After breakfast, we walked along the beach, bare feet sinking into the cool sand. Children ran ahead with buckets, chasing gulls. Couples strolled with arms linked. It was a picture of calm that felt almost unreal against what I knew was happening back home. Ethan slipped his hand into mine. "Do you feel lighter?" he asked. I nodded slowly. "For the first time, I think I do." By midday, the videos had multiplied, clips of guests whispering, of Sophie shouting, of Mark storming through the parking lot while someone filmed from behind a row of cars. Ethan showed me one where the caption read, "When the groom runs before the cake even arrives." The comments were merciless. "She must have done something. Poor guy dodged a bullet." Others were just laughing, emojis strung together. I sat on the balcony again that afternoon, looking out at the waves. My phone was heavy in my hand, dozens of missed notifications glowing red. I didn't open a single one. Instead, I opened the camera, framed a cocktail glass against the horizon, and typed the words that had been floating in me since we arrived. Glad I wasn't invited. Turns out I had front row seats anyway. I hit post and closed the app. The sound of the ocean filled the silence, drowning out the distant echo of my family's unraveling. Ethan joined me, setting a bowl of fruit on the table between us. "You're really not going to check your messages?" I shook my head. "Not now." He leaned back, squinting at the horizon. "Then let's just enjoy this while it lasts." As the sun lowered into the water and the sky flared pink and gold, I realized this was the first time Sophie's chaos had not pulled me under. The world was watching her now, not me. And I felt no need to step into the frame. The waves broke steadily against the shore. The light dimmed, and the night settled around us with a quiet that felt almost sacred. The following morning, Ethan came out onto the balcony with his phone in his hand. His expression caught somewhere between disbelief and amusement. "You're not going to believe this," he said. I was still pulling my hair into a loose bun, the ocean breeze cool on my face. "What now?" I asked, bracing myself. He set the phone down in front of me, the video already cued. The frame shook as a guest panned across the wedding reception. Tables draped in white linen. A string quartet trying to play over the noise, voices rising louder with each second. Then the camera caught my Uncle Robert, his face red, finger pointing directly at my father. His words were sharp, cutting through the polite music. "You made her pay for it. Richard, you made Claire cover your daughter's bills. Everyone heard it, and you sat there like it was nothing." Gasps rippled through the crowd. My father's jaw tightened, his hand curling into a fist at his side. "That is not your business," he snapped. But Robert didn't stop. "She wired $25,000 for this circus, and you let Sophie erase her from the guest list. You're a coward." The camera jolted as people shifted in their seats, torn between pretending nothing was happening and watching the cracks split wide open. I felt my own chest tighten, as if I were standing there instead of watching from hundreds of miles away. Ethan glanced at me, but I kept my eyes on the screen. My father's face was stone, but I knew that look. The one he wore whenever he had been exposed, the one that dared anyone to challenge him further. Robert shook his head, muttering something about shame before storming off, leaving the music faltering in his wake. The video cut, but another notification buzzed. Ethan tapped it, and this time the frame opened to my grandmother, Helen. She stood in the center of the dance floor, silver hair catching the chandelier light, her voice surprisingly strong for a woman in her 80s. She raised a hand and the chatter dipped. "This is what happens," she said. "When you cut out the people who actually love you, you erased Claire for vanity, for image, for nothing that matters. And now look at what you have left." Her words hung in the air like smoke, curling into every corner of the room. Someone in the background dropped a glass. The camera zoomed clumsily, but it caught Sophie standing frozen, mascara streaked, clutching her bouquet as if it could keep her upright. My father shifted uncomfortably at the edge of the frame, my mother staring down at her lap. For once, Nobody could rescue them with polite smiles or forced laughter. The clip ended, and I set the phone down carefully, as if it might burn me. I had never heard my grandmother speak like that. Not once in all the years of quiet, family dinners and polite deflections. She had been the one who stayed silent when my mother asked me to give up Duke. When my father praised Sophie's smallest accomplishment while ignoring mine. But now, in front of everyone, she had said the truth out loud. Ethan let out a long breath. That woman is braver than half the people I know. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the sea. Maybe she finally realized silence was killing more than it saved. My voice wavered, but there was a strength in saying it. By afternoon, the internet had taken hold of the story. Hashtags flooded TikTok and Twitter. Stitched videos spreading faster than wildfire. Justice for Claire scrolled across the screen again and again. Voices I had never met, echoing my years of silence. Strangers typed things like, "She deserves better," and "Imagine cutting out your sister after she paid for your wedding." The numbers ticked upward by the minute. Views climbing past 1 million. Comments piling under every clip. Ethan turned his screen toward me, showing a montage someone had edited. My sister sobbing. My uncle shouting. My grandmother's voice ringing out. At the bottom of the video, in bold white letters, it read, "This is what happens when you erase blood." I pressed my fingers against my lips, not sure whether to laugh or cry. I thought of all the times my mother told me I was overreacting, that Sophie was fragile and needed more. I thought of the checks I wrote, the favors I granted, the way I swallowed my own ambitions until they were unrecognizable. And now the truth was out. Not whispered in kitchens or argued in cars, but broadcast to millions. The irony was sharp. It had taken being erased for the world to finally see me. We walked the beach again that evening, the tide rolling cool around our ankles. Ethan kept glancing at me, as if he expected me to crumble under the weight of it. But I felt something different. Not vindication exactly, but a strange kind of balance, like the scales had finally tilted back toward level. The sky turned orange and violet as the sun sank. Gulls wheeling overhead. I wrapped my arms around myself, the breeze lifting the hem of my dress. For so long I had been the invisible one, the responsible one, the one whose sacrifices were buried under someone else's spotlight. Now, without me lifting a finger, the spotlight had shifted, and it was too harsh for Sophie to survive under. When we returned to the room, my phone buzzed again, vibrating across the nightstand. I picked it up, stared at the flood of notifications, and set it back down. I wasn't ready to read them. Instead, I poured a glass of water, sat beside Ethan, and let the silence stretch between us. Outside, the waves kept breaking, steady and unbothered, as if reminding me that storms pass and truth, once spoken, cannot be undone. The call came just as I was brushing my hair, the sound of the waves seeping faintly through the balcony doors. The name on the screen made me pause. Helen Whitman. My grandmother had never been one for late-night conversations, and for years, she had stayed quiet in moments that begged for her voice. I answered anyway, my throat tight. Her voice was raspy but clear. "Claire. Sweetheart. I hope I'm not disturbing you." I sat down on the edge of the bed, pressing the phone tighter to my ear. "Of course not. Grandma. What's wrong?" There was a long breath on the other end. "I should have told you this years ago," she said. "Your grandfather left you something. Something important." My chest stiffened. She went on before I could speak. "Before he passed, he updated his will. He wanted you to have Monterey House and his shares in Whitman Holdings. He said you were the only one who understood responsibility without expecting applause." I closed my eyes, feeling the sting behind them. "But Mom said he left everything to her and Aunt Caroline." I remember the reading. Helen's voice dropped, heavy with guilt. "That was the old version. Your mother knew about the new one. She was in the room when he signed it. But when he passed, she presented the older will to the family. She told everyone it was final. And I didn't stop her. The silence between us felt like a lifetime. My grandmother's breathing was uneven. As if the confession was draining her. I whispered, "Why? Why would you stay quiet?" Her answer came low and broken. "Because I was afraid. Afraid the family would break apart. Afraid of watching my children tear each other down in court. I thought silence would keep us together. But all it did was erase you." I pressed my palm to my forehead, staring at the carpet. It wasn't shock. It wasn't even anger. It was clarity. The final piece of a puzzle. I had always felt, but never seen, all the strange looks at holiday dinners. The way my mother snapped when I asked questions about my grandfather's accounts. The unease that clung to every conversation about the house in Monterey. Now it all made sense. Helen's voice steadied slightly. "I have spoken with Ava Monroe, your grandfather's attorney. She still has the signed and notarized copy. She's preparing to file in Atlanta next spring. You will hear from her soon. It may be contested, but the evidence is strong. The law is on your side." I leaned back against the headboard, staring at Ethan across the room. He had stopped what he was doing and was watching me carefully, reading the shift in my expression. I nodded once at him before answering. "Thank you for telling me, Grandma." Helen exhaled a shaky sigh. "I should have done it sooner. I am so sorry for letting you carry this alone." When we ended the call, I set the phone in my lap and stayed quiet for a long time. Ethan crossed the room and sat beside me, his hand finding mine. "What did she say?" I told him, each word feeling both heavy and liberating. The house, the shares, the will, my mother's silence, my grandmother's guilt. He listened without interruption, only tightening his grip when my voice faltered. When I finished, I leaned my head against his shoulder. "It's strange," I said softly. "I thought I would feel vindicated. But all I feel is tired." He kissed the top of my hair. "Because it was never about money for you. It was about truth. And now you finally have it." The room was dim except for the lamplight. The ocean outside roared faintly, constant and untouchable. I thought about Monterey House, its wraparound porch and white columns. The place where my grandfather used to sit with me in the evenings, telling stories while Sophie ran circles for attention. I thought about how my mother must have looked me in the eye all these years, knowing she had buried the truth. The realization ached, not like a wound freshly cut, but like an old scar pressed too hard. I got up and stepped out onto the balcony, the night air cool against my skin. Ethan followed, leaning on the railing beside me. "So what happens now?" he asked. "I don't know," he admitted. "Ava will file. There will be hearings, maybe headlines. But for me, the decision has already been made. I don't need to chase what was stolen anymore. It's already mine. Whether they admit it or not." He nodded, eyes fixed on the dark horizon. "You don't have to fight alone." I turned to him, the corners of my mouth lifting faintly. "I know." We stood there in silence for a while, the stars scattered above us, the tide rolling in steady as breath. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even surprised. I was simply awake, finally seeing the truth without the fog of loyalty or obligation. And that kind of clarity, sharp and unforgiving, was its own kind of inheritance. The morning came with gulls crying outside our balcony and the faint hum of waves rolling in. But Ethan's expression told me peace would not last long. He was already scrolling through his phone, his jaw tightening the way it did when something disturbed him. I pulled the curtain open wider, letting sunlight spill into the room. "What is it now?" I asked, bracing myself. He glanced at me, then tilted the phone so I could see. The video had already racked up hundreds of thousands of views. Olivia Harris, the stylist Sophie had paraded across Instagram for months, sat in what looked like a storage room, stacked with garment bags and half-empty champagne glasses. Her tone was hushed but steady, as though she had rehearsed the words before, daring to post them. "So, I just styled a wedding where the groom left mid-ceremony. Not dramatic. Not exaggerated," he actually said. And I quote, "I'd rather walk out now than lie forever." The video cut sharply to shaky footage of Mark storming down the aisle, pushing past his groomsmen as guests craned their necks. The sound of Sophie's voice filled the frame. Shrill and breaking. "This isn't my fault. Somebody talk to him." Olivia's face returned. Her lips pressed together in something between pity and irritation. The bride spent the rest of the evening blaming everyone she could reach. Staff, family, friends, anyone but herself. I lowered the phone into my lap, the ocean breeze pressing cool against my skin. Ethan leaned back in his chair. "She didn't have to post that," he said. "She wanted to." I traced the rim of my glass with my fingertip. Maybe she was tired of carrying Sophie's lies, too. But the storm was only beginning. By noon, another TikToker, Olivia Jameson, had released a full-length analysis, her clipped voice narrating over stitched footage from the ceremony. The reception, even screenshots of Sophie's Instagram captions. At the top of the video in bold letters was the phrase number, "Justice for Claire." The irony was so sharp it made me laugh under my breath. My name, the one they had erased, now flashing across millions of screens. Ethan refreshed the feed, the numbers climbing faster than we could track. Top trending. Claire. It's not just Charleston anymore. It's everywhere. His voice carried both awe and disbelief. I pulled my knees to my chest, staring past him at the sea. For years I had been told to be quiet, to keep peace, to carry the weight without recognition. And now strangers were saying the words my family never dared. When dinner ended that night, I was almost tempted to turn my phone off completely. But something inside me wanted to see. I opened Instagram just in time to catch Sophie's live stream. Her face filled the screen, blotchy and pale, eyes red and swollen. "I never wanted to lose my sister," she said, her voice cracking. "I wanted things to be perfect. I love her. I always have. I just didn't know how to balance everything." The comments fired back in a relentless wave. "Then why did you erase her? Perfect for who? Your Instagram followers. You cut her out after she paid for your wedding." Some posted broken heart emojis, but most were sharp, slicing through her tears. Sophie tried to keep speaking, tried to paint herself as misunderstood. But her words faltered under the weight of thousands watching in real time. I closed the stream halfway through, the sound of her sobs still echoing faintly in my ears. Ethan was beside me, his phone still lit as the feed rolled on. He looked at me carefully. "You're not shaken." I met his gaze. My voice steadied. "The internet is showing her reflection. She can't stand it. But it isn't mine to carry anymore." He reached for my hand, his thumb brushing over my knuckles. "You don't need to answer any of it." I nodded, setting my phone face down on the table. For the first time, I didn't feel the pull to defend myself. The truth was already loud enough without me. Later, we walked along the shoreline, the sand cool against our bare feet, the tide reaching lazily for our ankles. The night sky was heavy with stars, the kind of clear brilliance you only saw away from cities. I let the sound of the waves wash over me, steady and constant, while Ethan's presence beside me anchored me to the moment. Still, when we returned to the room, curiosity tugged at me. I opened TikTok again, scrolling past countless edits. There was Sophie crying on stage, Sophie screaming at the staff, Sophie staring blankly into her phone. But then I found a new clip. Olivia Harris, again, speaking into the camera, this time with sharper words. "Sometimes families create their own villains," she said. "They cut out the one person who keeps them whole. And when the facade crumbles, everyone sees the truth." The comments were merciless. People dug through old posts, screenshots, anything they could find to stitch the narrative together. They wrote things like, "She erased her sister for clout, and money can buy chandeliers but not character." The hashtag climbed into the top 5 trends by morning. I lay back against the pillows, the glow of the phone illuminating my face. I should have felt vindicated, triumphant even. Instead, I felt something quieter, balance. It was as if all the years of silence, of being told to shrink myself into the background, had finally broken open. And the sound that poured out wasn't my voice, but a chorus of strangers echoing the truth. Ethan turned off the lamp and slid under the covers, pulling me close. "The world is fighting for you now," he murmured. I let out a soft breath, my head resting against his chest. "No. They're fighting for what's right. And that's enough." The night stretched calm around us, the ocean whispering against the shore. Somewhere across the state, Sophie was still crying into a phone screen. But the tide was no longer mine to stop. I closed my eyes, the rhythm of waves and Ethan's steady breathing lulling me, knowing that, for once, the battle was being fought without me lifting a hand. The first sound I heard when I woke was not the waves, but the sharp vibration of my phone against the nightstand. I rolled over, the sheets warm against my skin, and saw Valerie's name glowing across the screen. For a moment I lay still, staring at the letters, letting the hum fill the room until it stopped. A second later it started again. Then again. By the third call, I pressed decline and turned the volume all the way down. My thumb hovered over the voicemail icon, but I didn't open it. I slipped out of bed and padded barefoot onto the balcony, the early light casting pale gold across the water. Ethan stirred behind me, but I stayed quiet, holding the railing as the phone buzzed once more. When he finally joined me, his hair still tousled, I handed him the phone. "They won't stop," I said. He glanced at the screen, brows lifting when he saw my mother's name listed over and over. "What do they want?" he asked. I swallowed hard. What they've always wanted: for me to clean up their mess. By mid-morning, the calls multiplied. My father's number flashed, then Sophie's. Each time, a voicemail followed. When I finally opened my inbox, I found 4 new emails, all stamped urgent. The first, from my mother, was short. "Claire, you must come home. The press is brutal, and Sophie is falling apart. Think about our family name. Please help us fix this." Fix. That word had become a chain in my life. Every mistake Sophie made, every bill left unpaid, every plan that fell apart, I was always the fixer. Reading it now, I felt something harden inside me. I closed the email without answering. Another message from my father followed, longer but no warmer. "Claire, you are making this worse by staying silent. Reporters are calling. People are asking questions. You need to speak up. You know Sophie didn't mean harm. You know family unity is more important than appearances. Do the right thing." My jaw clenched as I scrolled. Not once did he ask if I was all right. Not once did he acknowledge what they had done to me. Just more instructions. More demands, cloaked in the language of duty. That afternoon, Sophie herself tried. Her text came in jagged bursts. "Claire, please. I can't take this. Everyone is blaming me. They think I'm heartless. I need you. You're the only one who can make them understand." I let the words sit on the screen until they blurred. For years, I had been the lifeline she clung to, the one who absorbed her tears after breakups, who transferred money to her account when her credit cards maxed out. Now, even after cutting me from her wedding, she still reached for me, expecting me to rescue her image. Ethan found me staring at the phone, my hands trembling slightly. He set a glass of water beside me and crouched down. "Talk to me. What's going on?" I handed him the phone, letting him read Sophie's message. He looked up, his eyes steady. "What do you want to do?" I took a deep breath, the air heavy with salt and sun. "I want to block them. All of them." He didn't flinch. "Then do it. But make sure it's your choice. Not just your anger speaking." I nodded slowly, feeling the certainty settle in me like a stone. This wasn't anger. It was clarity. I picked up the phone and opened my call log. Valeria. Block. Richard. Block. Sophie. Block. Each confirmation left me lighter, though a faint ache pulsed when I pressed my mother's name. For a moment I hesitated, but then I remembered her email, her voice telling me for years not to make things harder, not to take things personally. I tapped block and let the silence flood in. Not an hour later, my cousin Tori texted. She had always been different. Softer. Uninterested in the spotlight Sophie thrived on. Her message was simple. Sophie asked me to reach out. She says she needs to talk to you. My chest tightened. Before I could reply, another bubble appeared. I told her I'd pass it on. But here's the truth. You don't owe them anything. I stared at those words, reading them again and again. My throat ached. My vision blurring. Permission. That was what it felt like. For so long I had believed my worth depended on what I gave, what I fixed, what I endured. Now someone in the family was finally saying what I had been afraid to believe. I showed Ethan the screen. He read it, then looked at me. So what will you say? I shook my head. Nothing. This time, silence is my answer. That evening we walked the beach. The tide curling cool around our ankles. The sky washed in lavender. My phone was tucked in the room, face down on the nightstand. For once, I didn't feel its pull. The waves moved in their rhythm. The gulls cried overhead. And I let myself belong to the moment instead of their expectations. When we returned, the inbox was full again. Subject lines screamed in capital letters. Please. Call now. Sophie's latest email said, I can't do this alone. Everyone hates me. They're saying I destroyed the family. You have to tell them that's not true. I read only the first line before closing it. My heart was steady now, not cruel. Not vengeful. Just certain. Ethan poured 2 glasses of wine and handed me one. You look like you can breathe, he said softly. I exhaled, feeling my shoulders drop, because I'm not carrying them anymore. We sat on the balcony in silence, the sound of the ocean folding around us. My phone buzzed faintly inside, muffled through the walls. But he didn't move. The night stretched wide, the stars scattering overhead. And for the first time in my life, I let my silence speak for me. The morning light spilled into the room before I even opened my eyes. Soft and golden through the sheer curtains, I stretched slowly, the sound of waves steady in the background, and reached for my laptop almost without thinking. I hadn't checked my emails in days, and part of me dreaded what might be waiting. Still, something nudged me to look. At the very top of my inbox was a message from Ava Monroe. My breath caught as I clicked it open. The court has officially accepted the filing. Her message read, the signed and notarized will is on record. A preliminary hearing has been set for April 2024 in Atlanta. Claire, this is a strong position. We will prepare for every possible objection. But you should know, the law is on your side. I sat back in the chair, letting the words settle into me. For months I had felt like the truth was something fragile, something that could be brushed away if my mother willed it. Now it was real, stamped by the court, preserved where her denial could not erase it. Ethan came out of the kitchen, holding 2 mugs of coffee. One already sweetened the way I liked it. He saw my face and paused. Good news or bad? I turned the screen toward him. He read quickly, then set the mugs down with a grin. Claire. That's huge. It's finally out in the open. I nodded, my throat thick with a mix of relief and exhaustion. I don't even know what to feel. He squeezed my shoulder. You don't need to feel anything but free. The day carried on quietly until just after lunch, when my phone rang with a call from New York. It was Marissa, my partner at the agency. Her voice was bright, almost breathless. Claire. They signed. He blinked. Signed what? The travel brand. The $500,000 contract. They're officially on board. I laughed in disbelief, pressing my hand to my forehead. Are you serious? Marissa chuckled. I just sent the paperwork. You did it. We did it. When the call ended, Ethan was already looking at me with raised brows. You look like you just won the lottery. I laughed again, my chest bubbling with something I hadn't felt in years. The contract went through. $500,000. He broke into a wide smile, scooping me into his arms and spinning me once before setting me down. Claire, do you hear yourself? $500,000. All those nights of you doubting whether the business would make it. And now look. I pressed my forehead to his chest, the joy mingling with a sting of memory. My family had mocked the agency when I first launched it. They called it a hobby, a distraction. Sophie told her friends it was my little side project. And now the same company they dismissed was worth more than any of them had believed possible. Karma had a strange way of arriving, quiet and undeniable. That evening, I made the mistake of opening Instagram. Sophie had posted again. This time, a carousel of old family photos. She chose carefully us as children in matching Christmas pajamas. A snapshot of me pushing her on a swing. Even one of all four of us at a lake picnic when things still looked normal. The caption read, "Families fight, but they heal." I'm so thankful for mine. For a moment, my chest tightened. Then I scrolled to the comments. Where is Claire? One after another. The same question filled the thread. You can't erase your sister and then post this. Healing without Claire isn't healing. The comments grew sharper. Some tagging the videos of her breakdown at the wedding. Others stitching in Olivia Harris's damning behind-the-scenes clip. A few simply posted the now familiar phrase number, "Justice for Claire." I set the phone down, my hands steady. Ethan watched me closely, gauging whether I was shaken. Instead, I picked up my wine glass and took a slow sip. They don't believe her anymore, I said quietly. The picture she's tried to paint all her life is crumbling. We ate on the balcony, the sea air wrapping around us as the last light of day faded into indigo. Ethan leaned back in his chair, his face soft in the glow of the lantern. How does it feel? He asked. Strange. E admitted. To win on both fronts at once. The court has taken the truth seriously. My business is thriving. And Sophie? She's losing everything she worked to protect. He tilted his head. And yet part of me feels tired, I said. Not because I don't want these victories, but because I spent so long trying to earn scraps of recognition from them. Now I realize I didn't need their approval in the first place. He nodded, his eyes warm. That's the difference. You're not proving them wrong anymore. You're proving yourself right. The words sank into me as we finished dinner. Afterward, we strolled along the shoreline, the sand cool beneath our feet, the moon casting silver paths across the water. Each step felt lighter than the last. For the first time, my life wasn't tethered to their judgment. I was moving under my own power. When we reached the tide line, Ethan stopped and slipped his hand into mine. Do you know what I think? He asked. I smiled faintly. What? This is only the beginning, he said. I looked out at the dark horizon, the waves folding into each other endlessly. He was right. The battles that once defined me were behind me now. What lay ahead was mine alone, and I was finally ready to claim it. The next morning I sat on the porch with a notebook in my lap, the salt air brushing against my skin, and the steady roll of waves below reminding me of how small everything could feel when measured against the ocean. The page in front of me stayed blank for a long time. Finally, I wrote one word at the top. Mom. The pen moved slowly at first. I wrote about the piano recital she missed because Sophie had a fever. How she never asked how it went. How I quit playing for months, and she never noticed. I wrote about the 8th grade career day when every other kid had a parent beside them, and I stood alone with a poster I had made by hand. I wrote about the time she called me to wire Sophie money from my savings. Not even asking. Just assuming I would say yes. Line after line spilled out. For years I believed love was measured in usefulness. If I fixed enough, if I stayed quiet enough, if I carried enough, maybe I would earn the kind of belonging other daughters seemed to have by default. But what I really learned was that love in our house came with conditions, and mine were always heavier. The sun climbed higher. The paper filled. At the end, I wrote a single sentence that felt like a stone lifting off my chest. Real love does not demand silence as proof. When I finished, I set the pen down and looked at the words. They felt sharp, rough, but also steady. I folded the pages once, twice, then carried them down to the beach. Ethan followed a few steps behind, saying nothing, just walking with me. I found a spot near the waterline where driftwood had collected. I knelt, dug a shallow pit in the sand, and placed the folded pages inside. Ethan handed me the lighter we had used the night before for candles. My hand trembled slightly, but I flicked the wheel and touched the flame to the corner of the paper. It caught quickly, orange and hungry, curling the words into ash. We sat there as the smoke lifted, the breeze carrying the fragments into the sky, watching them rise. I felt something inside me unclench. I had written it. I had spoken it on paper. And now I had let it go. The ocean pulled the tide closer, as if to carry away what remained. Ethan slipped his arm around me. "You okay?" he asked softly. I nodded, eyes still on the last ember, fading to gray. I don't need her to read it. I just needed to stop holding it. That afternoon we rented kayaks from the marina. The boards rocked gently as we climbed in, paddles dipping into water so clear I could see schools of fish darting below. The sun was bright, the air warm, and for once there was no noise except the rhythm of our strokes. We paddled out past the breakers, the island shrinking behind us. My muscles burned, but it was a good ache, one that reminded me I was moving forward under my own strength. Ethan glanced over, his paddle dripping light into the water. "You look lighter," he said. I laughed softly, feeling the breeze tangle my hair. "I feel lighter." We drifted for a while, letting the current carry us. I leaned back, letting the kayak sway beneath me, and stared up at the endless sky. No apology had come. No reckoning had been offered, and still, for the first time, I wasn't waiting. When we returned to shore, the sand hot under our feet. "I felt trenad." The words I had carried since childhood were ash now, scattered into wind and sea. The silence I had chosen no longer felt heavy. It felt like peace. That night, as the tide rushed high and the stars blinked awake, I sat beside Ethan with a blanket wrapped around my shoulders. The memory of the letter lingered. Not painful, not bitter, just finished. A circle closed. The life I had clung to was gone, and in its place was something quieter, something truer. I let the night hold me in that stillness, the embers of my old story gone, the horizon open and waiting. By the end of the year, I found myself standing backstage at a small theater in Santa Barbara. A microphone clipped to my collar and the glow of the red circle waiting beneath the lights. My palms were steady as I looked down at the card in my hand, though I didn't really need it anymore. The words had been with me for months, scribbled in margins, whispered into the wind on Sea Island, carried with me into every quiet morning since. When they called my name, I walked onto the stage. The audience was quiet, waiting. I let the silence settle before I began. No is a full sentence. The words rang clear, simple, but the weight of them filled the space. I spoke about boundaries, about how saying no did not make you selfish, but whole. I spoke about years of silence mistaken for loyalty, about how love without respect is not love at all. Faces in the crowd lifted, some nodding, some holding back tears. I felt my voice grow stronger as I told them that belonging was never meant to cost our peace, that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is stop knocking on doors that never open. By the time I finished, the applause rose like a wave. I bowed my head slightly, not as a plea for approval, but as an acknowledgement of what had been shared. The video went online within days, and by the end of the month, it had spread across the country. Messages poured in from women who said they had finally set boundaries with siblings, mothers, even spoos. Some wrote that for the first time in years, they had chosen themselves without apology. I read their words late at night, not with the hunger for recognition I once carried, but with gratitude. My story had become more than mine. Back in Austin, Ethan and I signed papers for a townhouse near Lady Bird Lake. It was modest compared to the mansions Sophie flaunted online. But it was ours. Wide windows filled the rooms with morning light. The floors creaked just enough to remind us the house was alive. And the back deck overlooked the water where herons dipped low at sunrise. On weekends, we walked the trail that wrapped around the lake. Stopping for coffee at a small cafe tucked under the oaks, neighbors waved. Strangers nodded. And for the first time in my adult life, I felt rooted in a place that didn't demand anything of me but presence. We filled the walls with photographs from our travels, laughter spilling into rooms once silent. It wasn't perfect, but it was peace. Valerie never called again. Neither did Sophie. The silence stretched into months, then into a year, until their absence no longer felt like a wound, but a healed scar. Sometimes I wondered if they still told stories about me. If they painted me as the villain who abandoned them, but the wondering never lasted. Their voices no longer reached me. Ethan found me one evening on the deck, my notebook open beside a cooling cup of tea. He leaned against the railing, watching the lake darken as the sun dropped. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. I smiled faintly. "How quiet it is." He reached for my hand. "Quiet can be a gift." I nodded, feeling the truth of it settle in my chest. The girl who once bent herself to be useful had been replaced by a woman who no longer asked for permission to exist. If you have ever been erased, overlooked, or told you were too much or not enough, I want you to hear me now. You do not need to beg for a place at a table that was never built for you. You do not need to earn love by giving more than you can carry. Choosing yourself is not selfish. It is survival. And it is the most powerful form of justice you can give to a story that tried to silence you. So, if you've ever been left out of a celebration, cut from a list, or told that your worth was conditional, I hope you remember this. You are not the problem, and your no is enough. If this story has touched you, share your thoughts. Tell me where you are listening from. And subscribe for more stories of women who chose themselves. Because sometimes the most beautiful revenge is not destruction but freedom. And that freedom is waiting for you too.